Welcome back to another Hot Air Hot Flash minisode, where we take the complicated and controversial and the confusing and we blow the shit out of it until it makes sense. We blow the shit out of it. That's good. Or at least we try to blow the shit out of it so it's slightly less confusing. I'm Josh, and today we are talking about how a case makes its way to the Supreme Court. I know, I hear you. You're like, why are we doing this? But stick with me, because by the end of this episode, you're going to understand how a random petty parking ticket could theoretically, very theoretically, hypothetically, all the things, end up changing constitutional law. Plus, you'll be able to flex on your friends when they're like, wait, how does that work again? And I've been doing some episodes about Supreme Court cases, and although I've done the research, although I have quite literally sat down with two of the plaintiffs from Obergefell v. Hodges, Kim and Tammy Franklin. If you haven't listened to that episode, it came out on Tuesday, so you should give it a listen. They fought for marriage equality, and they are part of the reason that love won, but it's still so challenging for me to wrap my head around how that Supreme Court case process even works. So today we're just going to get into like a quick little refresher on the branches of government, how cases start locally, appeals courts, and why everyone is always appealing, and what the Supreme Court actually does, and why only a teeny tiny number of cases actually ever get there. So grab your iced coffee and your anxiety meds or whatever else is going to comfort you while we dive into some civic learning. Let's hit it. Part 1, the three branches. All right, let's start at the beginning. Let's keep this simple. The US government has three branches, and you probably remember this from your 6th grade government test that you probably cheated on. I cheated on just about every single test. I remember this girl, Tegan. I would look over her shoulder and be like, Tegan, what you writing there, girl? Because your boy needs some help. All right, here are the three branches. First, we have legislative. That's Congress. They make the laws. Think of them as the messy chef throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Then there is the executive branch. That's the president and all of the agencies under him, like the Department of Education or the Department of Making Your Life Fucking Miserable with Taxes, which also is known as the IRS. This branch enforces the laws. Then we have the judicial branch, the courts. They interpret the laws. They decide what the laws mean and if they're allowed under the Constitution. And in the judicial branch, we have a whole hierarchy of courts, kind of like a corporate ladder, but with more robes and less nepotism. The very top of this ladder, wouldn't you know it, the Supreme Court. Part 2, the court system from bottom to top, because who doesn't love a bottom and who doesn't love a top? So how does a case get to the Supreme Court? Well, it doesn't just start there. Here is the typical path. So we've got local or state court. Let's say you live here in San Diego, where I live, and you get arrested for, I don't know, jaywalking naked or something wild. You are charged under state law. So your case is heard in state court. You have your trial there. If you lose and you're like, nah, that's not fair, you can appeal to the state's Court of Appeals. Then we have the state Supreme Court. So if you lose again and you still think your rights were violated, that you were in the right, jaywalking butt-ass naked, you can try to appeal to your state Supreme Court. Not all states call it Supreme Court, but it is their highest court. Then we have the U.S. Supreme Court. If your case involves a federal constitutional issue, like your First Amendment right to streak down Broadway Street downtown, you can try to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. But, and here's the kicker, they don't have to take your case. Now, if your case is under federal law, let's say you hacked the Pentagon, which let's not do that, it goes a little something like this. And it goes a little something like this. I should wrap this whole next section. There's the U.S. District Court. This is where federal cases start. There are 94 district courts across the US. Then you have the US Court of Appeals. If you lose, you appeal to one of the 13 circuit courts of appeals. These courts review what happened in the district court to see if the law was applied correctly. And then lastly, the US Supreme Court. Again, if you lose in the Court of Appeals and your case raises an important constitutional or federal question, you can ask the Supreme Court to hear it by filing a petition for a writ of... I gotta call my Harvard friend. Please, hold on. Phone a friend. By filing a petition for a cert. Y'all, I am just the messenger, but it is called a writ of certiorari? Because legal language can't ever just be simple. It's Latin, which means to be more fully informed. Because lawyers are basically Harry Potter wizards throwing Latin spells at each other, in which I don't understand unless you're like expectus patronum or what are the other ones? I don't know. Focus. Get it together. Let's move on. Part 3. How many cases does the Supreme Court actually take? So here's the wild part. The Supreme Court gets around 7,000 to 8,000 petitions every single year. And you want to guess how many they actually take? Think about it. Take a second. How many do you think out of 7,000 to 8,000 cases they actually take? About 70 to 80 cases. A great way to think of that is like if only 1% of your Tinder matches ever responded. And well, wait, that's actually a bad example because none of my Tinder matches ever respond, but you get the idea. It's a very, very tiny percentage. And here's kind of like the breakdown of some of the cases that they'll take. They'll take cases where they resolve a split among circuit courts when 2 or more circuit courts disagree on the law. If they have national significance, if they're going to affect a lot of people, and to clarify important constitutional questions. If your case is just about wanting your neighbor to keep their cat off your porch, like, sorry, sweetie, SCOTUS ain't got the time for that. Part 4. What happens when the Supreme Court actually takes a case? So let's say your case is one of the chosen ones. Your case in which you streaked across the road, or you were jaywalking butt-ass naked, or you hacked the Pentagon. What happens then? Both sides file written briefs. They're legal arguments. Amicus briefs are filed by outside parties who care about the outcome. Amicus, which I, again, hope I'm saying that right, means friend of the court. But these friends are usually corporations or advocacy groups, not your Aunt Carol. Poor Carol. I'm sure she would ride or die for you, but they're not going to accept her argument. And then there's oral arguments. Each side gets 30 minutes to argue their case in front of the 9 justices. They get interrupted constantly by questions. Imagine giving a TED Talk while 9 people aggressively grill you mid-sentence. It sounds very fun, very confusing, very stressful. How do they even manage it? I would be sweating bullets. Then there's the conference and vote. The justices meet privately and they discuss the case and then they vote on it. There's also opinion writing. One justice writes the majority opinion explaining the decision. Others might write concurring opinions. They agree, but for different reasons, or dissenting opinions. They disagree entirely. And once that decision is out, it becomes binding precedent for the entire country. It can change laws, overturn past decisions, or establish new rights. Remember Roe v. Wade in 1973, or Obergefell v. Hodges in 2015 for marriage equality. Like, that all happened in the Supreme Court. And we know Roe v. Wade was overturned. So this is why I'm a little bit scared over here, but fingers crossed, let's keep that Obergefell v. Hodges in check. Part 5. Why is this important? So why should you care how a case gets there? Well, it reminds us of a few things, like change often starts locally. Marriage equality cases started with couples in specific states filing lawsuits, deciding to stand up. They didn't know they were going to go to the Supreme Court. And your vote for judges and local officials matters because it shapes who interprets laws at each level. And the Supreme Court isn't some mystical oracle. It's 9 humans with lifetime jobs, which that's interesting to me, but they're interpreting documents written in the 1700s. It's pretty wild. And that interpretation lately is kind of, well, I want to say up to interpretation. The interpretation's up to interpretation. And part 6, hot air listener question. I actually had someone comment on one of my Instagram stories, my story or a reel, and it was a man named Tony in Atlanta, and he asked, if the Supreme Court makes a decision, can it be changed later? And that's what I've been asking. I have been asking everyone I can because I'm like, hello, are they going to overturn gay marriage? Please, someone fill me in and make it make sense. And it's a great question. And the answer is kind of yes, but only in 2 ways. Either they overturn their own precedent, which has happened many times throughout history, or the Constitution is amended. But amending the Constitution is extremely difficult. It takes a 2/3 vote in Congress and ratification by 3/4 of the state. So the odds of winning the Powerball are probably better than actually changing or rewriting the Constitution. And really, there you have it. From local trial courts all the way to the marble halls, I got to draw there for a second, all the way to the marble halls of the Supreme Court. Next time you see a major SCOTUS decision in the headlines, you'll know it wasn't just plucked from thin air. It was a long journey of legal battles, appeals, cert petitions, and 9 justices interrupting people mid-sentence during their 30-minute plea for existence. And if you like today's episode, do me a favor, share it with your friends, your coworker, or that one person in your life who still thinks that Judge Judy is on the Supreme Court. That would actually be a bit better than some of the ones that are there right now. And well, if you didn't like this episode, then you can file an appeal, but good luck getting to SCOTUS. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Hot Air Pod. New episodes, your minisodes, are out every Friday, and full-length episodes come out every Tuesday. And remember, keep your arguments strong, your citations accurate, and don't streak naked across the road unless you are ready to get arrested. But also, maybe go do it just for funsies. All right, I'll see you next Tuesday.